One day I went to the House of Musical Traditions to buy some strings. As I approached the cashiers, I was looking at the accessories on the wall and noticed this very small capo. I asked the cashier, "What is that?" And he said, "Oh, that's a Shub partial capo." At this point in my musical journey, I had never used capos, but I became intrigued by this idea that this capo would only cover 3 strings, and I wondered what that might do to my tuning. So I bought it and took it home to explore. And let me tell you one thing about that. That was not the last capo I have ever purchased. What does one do with a partial capo? Well, before I answer that question, let me clarify one thing. I don't play in a standard guitar tuning. I play in a C pentatonic tuning, so what you're going to hear is already going to sound different to you. But the obvious things one can do with a partial capo is put it in the first position, second position, third position on the high strings, and these capos by their nature will cover the second, third, and fourth string then. Or you can put it in the low position, and then you'd be covering the fifth, fourth, and third strings. And again, you can move it around positions and see what works for you. So that's the obvious. And one of the first things that worked for me was with this capo in the second position, this piece, Gathered Hearts, came out. See, when we had that capo there, the relationships, what used to be fifths with the third on top, is now changed, and that open string, the chords change with the open string. So it's a very fruitful path of discovery you can go down with this. Then you can do the obvious and add a full capo to it. So here I'll put the full capo in the first position. And I've got many, many beautiful ideas out of this, like this one, Dancing Free. But there have been many others that came out of that, passages, and it's just a very fruitful way. Something I began exploring a couple years back was to move this partial capo into the fourth position and the full into the second. I've discovered 2 beautiful, beautiful pieces in that. One on the anniversary of my father's passing, and it's called Taking Flight. So these are the obvious things that one can do with a capos. But what else is possible for you to explore? One Friday evening, I was driving home from work. My wife was going to be away for that weekend, and I was going to have the whole weekend to do as I wished. And I was looking forward to just having a very musical weekend. And I remembered an article I was reading in a magazine, a guitar magazine, earlier that week. And it mentioned that line from the movie Spinal Tap, that D minor is the saddest key of them all. I started thinking about that. D minor, well, that's a B flat. And I had an idea of how I could shift my tuning to a D minor tuning. So I got home and I took an extra pad that I had for the capos and I cut it so that it would only cover 1 string. Then I placed it on my third string, which is an A, to turn it into B flat. and then I shifted the C to a D, so that then I had this D minor tuning. Now what do I do with it? I had no idea, so I start to improvise, and suddenly this came out. That's the intro to Scattered Hearts, which became the title track for my first album. Since then, times I was in the basement here improvising after playing through Scattered Hearts, and another piece, Matka Baska, came out, and then Present. These capos have just opened up the world for me. One problem with this capo on one string was that it had a tendency it gets knocked easily when I'm playing. So I did take it to the hardware store and had the nub sanded down about 1/8 of an inch so that it sits more in place. Another thing I've done is make a 2-string partial capo. Same thing, take the pad, cut it down. And I've used these all in combinations in various ways that I'm not going to play through all of them or anything. What I'm trying to do is give you options to explore your compositional process with these wonderful shub partial capos. Now, 20 years later, I want you to know, since that night I bought my first partial capo, I now own 4 shub partial capos, 2 full capos, and one of their 5-string capos. I've experimented with them in so many different ways. As I showed you earlier, I've taken the C and tuned it to a D. I've also tuned it to an E flat. I improvise in these tunings, and sometimes that little musical idea that can be developed arises. Now there's a challenge to this. It makes it much more difficult to memorize a piece of music to be able to perform it, because what used to be, say, a C minor chord may no longer be that because of this change in the open string relationship. In her book, Visual Intelligence, the author Amy Herman said that Steve Jobs, Leonardo da Vinci, that for them, invention was less about creation than it is about discovery. And for me, these partial capos have led to numerous paths of discoveries. And I have to laugh when I think about it. I have yet to write a piece with just a full capo on my guitar. Perhaps this will be my next exploration. What will be your exploration?